new hope is what we have been given by the Lord. A new hope is what we have been given by the Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. A new life is what we have been given by the Lord. A new life is what we have been given by the Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. A new heart is what we have been given by the Lord. A new heart is what we have been given by the Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord. Hallelujah, 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 Lord.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome once again to our Unity of Monterey Bay online virtual Unity community. We continue to hold the high watch during these times for our nation and for the world, and especially for our nation's leaders, keeping them always in our prayers for healing, for wholeness, for wisdom, and for divine guidance. As we breathe into this now moment together, we affirm our oneness with all beings around the world, recognizing that we can dissolve any and all human perceived illusions of division and separation through the light of truth and love. Well, as you know, I'm Reverend Michelle Jelinch, and our beloved senior minister, Reverend Vicki Elder, continues on her time of family and in Cincinnati with her daughter and her grandchildren, just having a wonderful time. So we hold her in our hearts and in our prayers, blessing her and holding for her a restful and restorative and celebratory and just fun time and a safe return to us in the next week or so. I'm here this morning with our Essential Sunday team. As always, it takes a village to create these Sunday services. There are so many people working behind the scenes that you don't see. But I have this morning with us our awesome music director, Denise Headland. Got John Talon this morning on drums and also taking care of the sound board and such. Our co-chair, Robin Falkenberg, is doing our platforming this morning. Jan Lindenthal Cox is doing the live streaming. And Larry Sanks and Keith Larson doing logistics and the coffee, which is the most important thing of all. And we just appreciate everyone who comes together on these Sunday mornings to help us to hold this space so that we can bring this service to you in your homes. A reminder to our guests that we do require that everyone wear masks, and I do have my Day of the Dead mask this morning. Throughout the service, and especially when you're up and moving about, obviously except for those of us who are on platform and speaking and such. A reminder that you can hum behind your mask, but singing is not recommended because it's not safe, puts out more air. So go ahead and hum along with us. So let us begin this morning by affirming our Unity of Monterey Bay sacred mission as an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on this planet. In celebrating our oneness, we honor the God of each of our understanding, and we affirm the innate good and divine essence within each and every individual. Will you please join with me in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. So it is. So as we prepare and open our hearts and minds even wider into this sacred time together, breathing again into this present moment, let's begin with a moment of prayer this morning. The God of each of our understanding, Mother, Father, God, Holy Spirit, Creator, Source, Divine Mind, the all in all, God of so many names and faces. We've come together this morning to commune with you and with one another and to create a sacred space where we can engage in that sacred communion together, helping one another to remember our oneness. And we give thanks for this beautiful fall day, for the beauty of God's creation, and for the many blessings which we know and we experience are just raining down on us all the time. We lift up in prayer all those in need this morning, those who are suffering, those who are sick, hungry, who are struggling economically, who have lost their jobs, etc. We hold them gently in our hearts and affirm for them complete and perfect health and wholeness. And in these challenging times, especially this next challenging week, we just continue to pray for and know that we are always receiving divine guidance, divine wisdom, and divine intelligence, so that we may know what is ours to do. And we affirm that divine order is established right here and right now, and that all is well. And we ask for that guidance so that we may know how we can show up each and every day in loving ways, so that we can be demonstrations and expressions of that one great love that lives in and through us all. And so it is. Amen.
Yes, amen.
Will you please join me now in repeating our fall affirmation? Like rivers flowing from one source,
Like rivers flowing from one source,
we are all connected.
we are all connected.
And we know that is true. Amen. This morning, we have just a couple of quick announcements. And as always, for ongoing activities and such, we refer you to our weekly shout out. We have our first cutouts. I wish you all could see them, but we've got a number of gigantic heads in the pews this morning, and it looks really awesome. So you know you want your head to be one of those gigantic heads that's here in the pews with us. That we can make that happen for you for a donation of $50, and you can get 2 of them for $90. And that way you can be present here even when you can't be physically present. So if you want to do that, send a picture, a Head and Shoulders, picture to either to Vicki or to me or to Marianne, and you can mail in your check to the church or pay online, and we're going to fill the sanctuary with these lovely faces. They're all smiling at me. It's so cute. Just a reminder that we have begun again our Monday night prayer and meditation time. Okay, now they're all falling. Our prayer and meditation time, which Molly Steele is doing that for us on Monday nights and holding that sacred space for us. So the link for that is in your shout out. It begins at 7 o'clock. I believe it lasts about 45 minutes or so. So it's just a time of quiet prayer and meditation and holding that high watch for our community, for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our nation during this time. Today is our annual Day of the Dead celebration of life. So hopefully you received a blessing slip. I don't know, did those make it into the newsletter? They did? Okay, cool. Well, hopefully you have it. If not, of course, you can just take a little sticky note or piece of paper. It doesn't matter, but I wanted you to have these available. So during the service, you can, go ahead and write the names of your loved ones that you are honoring today. And if you haven't already, go and grab a candle and a way to light it so that you'll be prepared in the second half of our hour this morning for our Remembrance service. So we take a moment now to just remember and to bless our children, as well as all of the teachers, not just around the country, but around the world, because this distance learning thing is going on all over the world. And so we just hold them in our hearts, and we vow to, be kind to them when we meet them in the street and such, and just knowing that they are struggling and doing everything that they can to keep learning going for our children. So we just give them special love and prayers and thoughts today. Will you join me in our blessing for our children, those in our lives, our own inner children, and all the children around the world? We love you, we bless you, and we appreciate you just the way you are.
This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This bright light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
So now it's time for us to center ourselves and to deepen our blissful interconnection with Spirit. So taking a collective deep breath in and letting it out with an audible sigh. We just allow all distractions to gently fade away as we invite the chime to call us into the sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and to remind us of our interconnection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, we follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being. And with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into the divine flow. And again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine, as we experience a transforming wave of gratitude, and with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all, embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say, thank you, God. Now, fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from today's daily word, shared with permission from Unity, publisher of Daily Word, that can also be found on dailyword.com. And the word is remember. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. I bless the people whose lives have touched mine. Grandparents, parents, siblings, members of my extended family, teachers, friends, co-workers, every person I've known has, by his or her example, helped me feel more deeply what it means to be human. Some have encouraged my curiosity. Some have taught me life skills. Some have modeled positive attitudes and behaviors. Some have loved me fully and unselfishly. And some have helped me to learn to love, even when loving feels difficult. Today I remember the people whose lives have touched mine. I pause to think kindly of each one as I savor memories of times we spent together. Whether we're still in one another's lives, have lost touch, or are separated by death, I know the experiences we have shared continue to enrich our lives and deeply bless us on our spiritual journeys. And from the scriptures, I remember you always in my prayers. Romans chapter 1, verse 9.
I am that I am has brought me to this now moment. Here I am. I am that I am has brought me to this now moment. Here I am to be the voice and to be the heart through which heaven is made known on earth. To be the voice and to be the heart through which heaven is made known on earth. I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. I am that I am. I am.
In witness to the wisdom of the many paths to the sacred, we read from 3 sacred traditions on this morning's topic, honoring our loved ones. From Native American religions, someday the great chief above will overturn the mountains and the rocks. Then the spirits that once lived in the bones buried there will go back to them, into them. At present, those spirits live in the tops of the mountains, watching their children on earth and waiting for the great change which is to come. The voices of these spirits can be heard in the mountains at all times. Mourners who wail for their dead hear spirit voices reply, and thus they know that their lost ones are always near. From the Yakama tradition. From African traditional religions, those who are dead are never gone. They are there in the thickening shadow. The dead are not under the earth. They are there in the trees that rustles. They are in the wood that groans. They are in the water that runs. They are in the water that sleeps. And they are in the hut. They are in the crowd. The dead are not dead. Those who are dead are never gone. They are in the breast of the woman. They are in the child who is wailing, and in the firebrand that flames. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the grasses that weep. They are in the whimpering rocks. They are in the forest. They are in the house. The dead are not dead. Barago Diop, Mali poem. And from Judeo-Christianity, the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7.
Oh, we never know where life will take us. We know it's just a ride on the wheel. And we never know when death will shake So goodbye, my friend. I know I'll never see you again, but the time together through all the years will take away these tears. It's okay now. Goodbye, my friend. A life so fragile, a love so pure, we can't hold on, but we try. We watch it quickly, it disappears, and we'll never know why. But I'm okay now. Goodbye, my friend. You can go now. Goodbye, my friend.
Well, I hope everyone had a happy Halloween. And today and tomorrow are the days of the dead. And so we're going to be talking about that today. And we started sort of preparing for this topic last week. We talked about death, and we talked about the impermanence of life, the fact that this too shall pass, that all things eventually come to pass, and that includes even us. We also talked about our belief in unity, that even though the body dies, the consciousness, we believe, is eternal, and that in some way our loved ones and we go on. Although we don't know exactly how that works, we don't know exactly what happens when we die, but we do believe that consciousness is eternal. And so we talked about sort of embracing that mystery of just not knowing. We talked about how facing our own mortality and accepting the fact that we all will die one day and talking openly about death can actually really help us in a lot of ways. That it can take some of that fear and anxiety out of death. It can help us to grieve our own losses so that we don't accumulate loss after loss of, and that unresolved grief, unprocessed grief. And we talked about how it can even help us to consider our own deaths and those of our loved ones and planning for them in some ways, which is what we spent a lot of time doing last year. Planning both, legally, estate-wise, and also planning medically what we want our end-of-life scenario to look like. So there's a lot of benefits to talking about death. And we also talked about how avoiding death or denying death can actually create more fear. And then the end result is that it can keep us from fully embracing the life that we're having right now. So today we're going to talk about another perspective of death, particularly the Mexican perspective of death and the Day of the Dead traditions. And we're going to see that the Mexicans have a very different attitude toward death than the typical, let's say, American, which is really hard to say because we're so diverse. But let's just say in general, the American attitude toward death and the way death is portrayed in our media. Maybe looking at this other perspective from a different culture can help us to see death as a little less fearful, a little less anxiety-producing, less hidden, less repressed, and can help us move into greater acceptance of our own mortality. Last week, we also talked about the importance of grieving publicly or communally, together with one another. And so today, after my talk, we're going to have a chance to do a little bit of that communal acknowledgement of death and acknowledgement of our own losses with our Day of the Dead candle lighting and remembrance ritual. And a few of us will be sharing personally who we are honoring, who we are remembering today, and then we will each have a chance to light a candle to honor our own loved one. Whenever we borrow rituals and traditions from other cultures, it's extremely important that we give them the proper respect and reverence. And we can first do this by acknowledging that we are borrowing them, that they're not our own traditions of our own upbringing and our own culture. And then we can do our due diligence by taking the time to truly understand the traditions, learning a little bit about their background and their history, so that we can be sure that we are honoring these traditions properly. It's become pretty obvious to me in recent years that Americans have become enamored of Day of the Dead. We see the sugar skulls, that motif, on everything, am I right? From phone cases, T-shirts, earrings, scarves, T-shirts, earrings, let's see what else, bags. It's showing up everywhere. So one of my missions has been to educate people a little bit more about what Day of the Dead is, so that we're not just appropriating this motif for ourselves without having any understanding of where it comes from. So as a disclaimer, as you all know, I am not Mexican myself, but I did live in Mexico for a couple of years as a young person, and I was able to see firsthand how this beautiful holiday is celebrated. And I was fascinated by it from the beginning, and I started wanting to learn more about it, and I've been doing that over the years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've learned. So Day of the Dead, or in Spanish, Día de los Muertos, is celebrated predominantly by Mexicans and Mexican Americans, although it has spread to some other Latin American countries. But there's no doubt that it originated in Mexico. And it's a time when families honor their deceased loved ones, and they honor them and remember them during these days. The Day of the Dead celebration that has that, the modern day celebration is actually a centuries or possibly even millennia old tradition. And it resulted from the mix of the ancient indigenous traditions in Mexico with the Catholicism that was brought by the Spanish conquistadors. So when Cortez arrived in Mexico in 1519, he encountered this incredibly advanced and complex civilization of the Aztecs, or as they called themselves, Mexicas. And at that point, when Cortez arrived, they had come to dominate most of central Mexico. The ancient Aztecs had festivals and rituals that honored their dead around the time of the harvest. The Catholics, when they arrived and brought the Spanish, when they arrived and brought their Catholic traditions, had the traditions of All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. And so these were superimposed on top of the Aztec traditions, and the two things melded to create what we know today as the Day of the Dead celebration. During these days, Mexicans believe traditionally that the veil that sort of exists between the material world and the spiritual world is especially thin, permeable during this time. And so they believe that the souls of the dead are able to return during these days. They're given special license during this time to return and visit their family members in their homes. Sometimes they set up altars in their businesses and in the cemeteries. The preparation for these days, it's actually Days of the Dead because it's a days-long celebration. The preparation involves going to the cemeteries and lovingly cleaning the graves and decorating them with flowers and candles and things like that. And then also gathering in the cemeteries where there is food and drink and music. My mom said that I think it's called Oak Park Cemetery, it's where a number of my loved ones are buried in San Jose, that during this time, she'll go there to put flowers on my grandmother's grave, and there'll be mariachis playing and just, this beautiful, vibrant honoring and celebrating of their loved ones. Traditional families, which tend to be more in the southern part of Mexico and the places where the indigenous population is more concentrated, build these beautiful ofrendas or altars in their homes. And I don't know, Jan, maybe now would be a good time if you want to just show the one that we've created here. And so they construct these, and actually I don't know how much people are out and about now, but y'all know I have a Mexican food thing that just never quits. All the Mexican restaurants I've gone to in the past 2-3 weeks have had these set up inside the restaurants. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what the elements are that typically go on the altar because they date back to those ancient Aztec traditions. The first and most important element is the marigolds, which is called Flor de Cempasúchil, and this is considered to be the flower of the dead. The Aztecs used this flower for a number of reasons. First of all, it reminded them of the sun, and the sun was a very important thing to them. It was one of their most important gods, and so the bright color reminded them of that. And if you've ever had marigolds in your home, you know they have a very strong smell. And so the Aztecs believed that that strong scent would help to lure the dead back to visit them, sort of draw them, you know. And how many people have seen the movie Coco? We showed it here a couple years ago. So if you've seen that movie, now you understand a little bit more why the flower petals figure so prominently in the movie. You know, it's kind of a running throughout the movie. They also use a type of incense that was used by the Aztecs called copal. And again, the scent, the smoke and the scent were meant to draw the loved ones and help them find their way back from the afterworld to the land of the living. Now, what about those sugar skulls that we see on everything? And I'm as guilty of it as anyone else. I'm looking around, I'm seeing a lot of them right here today. So where did that sugar skull thing come from? Well, the Aztecs had a very complex religion, but essentially they believed that the sun and the moon would engage in battle every evening. And the sun needed extra strength and energy to be able to defeat the moon so that it could rise each morning. And so in order to get that extra energy, the sun required human blood. We know that the Aztecs were fierce and ambitious warriors. And when they would go into battle, they would take prisoners of war, and those were the folks who got to be sacrificed. And that, like I say, that blood, they believed, it sounds barbaric to us by today's sensibilities, but they believed that that blood was required or the sun would not rise the next day, which makes it a little more understandable why they did that. After the sacrifices, they would clean and dry the skulls and display them on racks. And there's actually one such rack was found at the Templo Mayor, which is the main temple of the Aztecs in Mexico City. It's right next to the National Cathedral, and they found a rack of skulls there. Today, the skull continues to represent death in Mexican culture, and Mexicans display many skulls during Day of the Dead. But they put an interesting twist on it. In our culture, let's say in typical American culture, the skull is kind of macabre, right? It's like, it has that creepy kind of connotation. Well, Mexicans make them out of chocolate, make them out of sugar, marzipan, and decorate them beautifully. And in Mexico, you can even get one with your name on it. So this idea of writing your name on a skull, that seems so strange to us. Morbid, perhaps, almost like a tempting of fate, like there's this superstition in us that goes, oh, I don't want to put my name on a skull. But again, we have to try to open our minds to perceive a very different way of looking at death. The Mexicans bring a much more playful and mocking perspective to death. So by getting a skull with your name on it, you're sort of saying, yeah, I'm going to die one day. But you're also sort of saying, neener, neener, I'm not dead yet, you know? And so it's kind of that attitude. Also on the altar, they obviously place photos of the loved ones that they are honoring, and religious objects, crosses and pictures of saints and such. And then lots of items that remind them of the loved ones that they are honoring. So for example, if the person played the guitar, they might place a guitar on the altar. If the person liked a certain kind of tequila or a certain beer, they would put one of those on the altar. And during the days leading up to this celebration, families in those traditional parts of the country are busy cooking the loved one's favorite meals, their favorite snacks, their favorite drinks, and placing all of these things lovingly on the altar. They also tend to put the staples like beans and rice and tortillas and tamales and all of these things that the dead apparently like to eat. And of course, there's pan de muerto. Now, I would have brought one to show you today, but my dog ate it. So, but you can go to any Mexican bakery during this time. They've had it for weeks. And it comes in a variety of shapes and sizes depending on what part of Mexico the bakers come from. But you can get bread that's shaped like a skeleton or has a little sugar skeleton head on it. Also, a little sugar Jesus face or the Virgin, or they place these on them. Again, seems a little strange to us, but it's that different sensibility. They also put a glass of water, typically, because the dead get thirsty. It's a long way back from the afterworld. And sometimes a cloth and a bowl of water to wash up, and traditionally salt for purification. So all of these things are designed to honor the loved ones, but also to invite them back. Now, this could be perceived literally or symbolically. I can't see into Mexican people's minds, but the idea is that the dead come back during this time and they partake of these offerings on the altar and they share this time lovingly with their families. So these things are meant to make the dead feel at home, which increases the chances that they will be able to come. Again, if you've seen the movie Coco, it kind of explains it a lot. If you haven't, get it, rent it. It's an amazingly beautiful. Yes, it's Hollywood, but I still think it does a lot to educate people about Day of the Dead. So let's talk a little bit about this perspective of death, which also dates back to the Aztecs, because for the Aztecs, death was part of that natural circle of life. So birth, life, death, and rebirth. They saw it as a cycle. It could even be said that for the Aztecs, life was the dream state, and death was the true life. Listen to this quote, which is attributed to an Aztec king and really encapsulates this idea. It says, "We come only to sleep, only to dream. It is not true that we come to live on this earth. We become as spring weeds. We grow green and open the petals of our hearts. Our body is a plant in flower. It gives flowers and it dies away." So this helps explain a little bit that understanding of that cycle of life and death. And even after melding with the Catholicism brought by the Spaniards, that Mexican attitude toward death that's reflected in the Day of the Dead traditions continues today, and they still retain a lot of that understanding of death that came from the Aztecs. So Mexicans typically view, what is the word that I want to use? It's sort of like they view death in a more circumspect way, like, yeah, death, you know? Americans tend to be like, oh, we don't want to look at it, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to see it. Mexicans accept death as part of life. And so rather than avoiding death, they face it head on. Now, if you've seen the typical aesthetic during this time, and in a lot of Mexican folk art, some of which I was able to bring back from Mexico a few weeks ago, you'll see the skeletons, right? So skeleton mariachis, and skeleton bride and groom, skeletons riding bicycles. So for me, the skeletons doing all these types of daily normal things that we all do is, again, it's to emphasize that idea that underneath it all, we're a skeleton. We are all going to die. And it also seems like it portrays death as a little more mundane, just doing daily things. But that's definitely reflects that attitude of death as being just something very normal, mundane even. The celebrated Mexican poet Octavio Paz, this is what he said about the Mexican understanding of death. He said, "The word death is not pronounced in New York, in Paris, in London, because it burns the lips. The Mexican, in contrast, is familiar with death, jokes about it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. It is one of his toys and his most steadfast love. True, there is perhaps as much fear in his attitude as in that of others, but at least death is not hidden away. He looks at its face." So just think a little bit about how that feels in contrast to our typical American attitude towards death. We just had Halloween. You know, everywhere you looked, there were decorations and things depicting death as violent, as bloody, as grotesque, as macabre. And if you, obviously in media, that's the way death is portrayed in our culture. And sometimes in this culture, it seems that we are reluctant to talk about death. It could be fear. Maybe we don't want to talk about death with people because we don't want to bring up those sad memories. Maybe we haven't done a very good job of processing our own grief, so we'd rather just not talk about it. And we typically don't want to bring it up with others, right? Like, we don't want to hurt someone or remind them of their loved one. It's a taboo subject. And so death is typically hidden, not spoken of. And this only increases our fear and our avoidance of it. And as I mentioned, it can definitely impede our grief process if we're not facing the fact that our loved ones have died. Talking about death and talking about our loved ones who have died can actually have many benefits, as I mentioned. It can help us process that grief, those unresolved issues, but it can also help us keep the memories of our loved ones alive. You know, and sometimes in my family, I have a beloved uncle who died almost 30 years ago, and I always want to bring him up at family gatherings, and I get the feeling that it's kind of uncomfortable for my family, and it's like, why can't we talk about him? You know, I miss him. I want to keep his memory alive. And so I'll say, oh, Jim would have loved that, or Jim would have done this or that, you know, that way of keeping those memories alive. It's also a way that those ancestors of ours can be passed on to future generations. I remember, you know, Vicki has shared with us that her grandsons, unfortunately, were never able to know their grandpa Rory in person. He died before they were born. But they know who he is. You know, they've seen pictures of him. They've heard stories about him. They are keeping his memory alive for them. And it's the same with my beloved Uncle Jim. My son has James as his middle name in honor of my uncle, and he died long before Alexander was born, but Alexander can pick him out in pictures. He knows who that person is because I've consciously kept that memory alive for him. So this is a way that we can pass on those stories, those values, those traditions onto future generations so that they don't get lost. So as I mentioned, we don't know what happens when we die. It's part of the great mystery. But one thing we know for sure is that we are all going to die eventually. And so I feel that it's healthy for us to normalize death, to accept and embrace our own mortality so that we can learn to live without that fear of death, and in that more consciously celebrate life. And so by borrowing for a little bit that Mexican perspective, it can help us to open up our understanding of death and maybe see it in a different way, through the eyes of the Mexican with that mocking and that playfulness and the colorfulness and the vibrance. So we can let go a little bit of that taboo and that stigma around death. I particularly love the humor, you know, the skeletons on bicycles and stuff. That it just appeals to me. It's an aesthetic that appeals to me. And I think humor is always a good way for us to deal with things that are uncomfortable. Octavio Paz said that a culture that denies death ends up denying life. So the extent to which we deny our mortality is the extent to which we miss out on truly living, and we talked a lot about this last week. Also, being mindful of the fact that our deaths are always imminent can help us make sure we don't squander any time, right? When our deaths become very present to us, then it's like, wow, you know, I want to enjoy today. I want to live. I want to do those things. I'm not going to put them off any longer. So it can help us to live more in the present. Our culture is not typically skilled at grieving. Grieving is often seen as a very private thing, something you don't show to others, you don't do in front of others. And I think that this has probably not always been true. There are other cultures that grieve very publicly. Think of some cultures where the women get together to wail. They have those rituals where they grieve together. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of that today, not the wailing necessarily, but the grieving and the honoring together publicly. And when we do this collectively and in a communal way, Again, it helps to normalize death, and we can see that common humanity in each other, because no matter who we are, how old we are, what walk of life we're from, we have all lost someone. And so that can be that common humanity that binds us together. And these Day of the Dead rituals can help us remind one another that we all share that, but help us remind one another that our loved ones are still with us. When we do it in that public way and we share their photographs with one another and we bring things to place on the altar, we're reminding one another, yes, their bodies have died, but in some way they go on and they are still with us. The love that we shared is still there, doesn't go away. And they're present with us, even if just in our memories, they are still with us. So, we're going to begin our ceremony by doing just that, by sharing a little bit about who we are honoring, who we are remembering today. I will start. I have this picture of my grandma and my great-grandma, and they came from Sweden, and I spent a lot of time with both of them when I was growing up. My great-grandmother died many years ago, but my grandmother died only 7 years ago. Seems like yesterday, but she's sort of the death who's most present for me because I was very close to her. And then also, I believe on the altar I've also placed a photograph of my beloved kitty. I wanted to mention that. I haven't said that yet, but to me, pets are family, and all of the research is showing that we grieve our pets just the same way that we grieve our human loved ones. So pets are totally valid, and honoring them for me on this day is very appropriate. So I'm honoring my beloved kitty, Molly. I've asked a few people to share. So Robin, would you like to begin? Just going to share who we are honoring today.
So I'm in the middle of a move, so all my photos are packed right now. But the first person I'd like to honor is my first husband, Charles Chuck Paul. We were together a little over 17 years, and he's the one that brought me to Monterey County, Big Sur, in 1983. And it really formed, I guess, who I am. It not only started my life here in this area, but a lot of the adventures we went on. We had a Harley. We rode quite a bit, and I sure miss that part. But the fun we had, the memories, like we say, we're honoring these people today. So I could go on, but I won't. The other person I'd like to honor today is a dear friend of mine who passed just a little over 2 years ago, Michael Richard Milan, Mike. He's the one who brought me here to Unity. And I think Mike was part of my life. You know, they come for a reason or a season. He was there for a reason, helped me through some tough times, brought me here, like I say. So that piece alone really, really turned my life around and gave me a new home, gave me new friends, new family. And for all of that, I will be eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Denise, would you like to go next?
I would like to honor my late husband, Jim, who passed away 11 years ago. Last year, I did a whole big thing with all the props and things, and I did put pictures on the altar there at the bottom there, and we had a great life together. I'll just say really quick how we met and how fast it was, because it wasn't your typical relationship. We met at school. Our students actually brought us together. We were both teachers, and our first date was January of 1987. 2 weeks later, we were engaged. 6 months later, we were married. And so there you go. And we had 22 wonderful years together, and we built a life together, had our family together. He was super passionate and intense, especially I'm thinking about now during politics. Oh boy, he'd be really fired up. So I tell you right now, I think about that. I just loved his strength and his character, integrity. He was so loving and supportive. So that's my Jim. And another person I wanted to talk about real quickly is Dennis Clark, who, if it wasn't for that man, I would not be who I am today, literally. I met him when I was 16. He was my choir director at Modesto High School. I didn't know I could sing. I was accompanying, playing the piano for the choir. And one day he just whispered in my ear, he said, "You have a beautiful voice. I want you to join the choir." And I thought, are you talking to me? I don't even sing. And I was humming, I guess. And that moment changed my life. And here I am today. So thank you, Dennis Clark, and thank you, Jim Headland. I love you both.
That's awesome. Thank you, Denise. Colleen, would you like to?
And I am here today to remember my husband, my last husband, my best husband, Dougie Adams. When he was a young man before his life was ahead of him, he went on to have 4 strapping big sons, and they all went into business with him. And my last working career was that of a property manager, and I had a leaky lanai that I needed fixed, and I didn't know who to go to. And I got Doug's number from a friend, and he showed up late, of course. And he wasn't, when I first saw him, it wasn't anybody I thought, this is going to be the man of my life. But as he started talking and assured me that he could fix the leaky lanai, and working with him over about a 4 or 5 month period while he's doing that and other things on this property, I knew before he did that he was going to ask me out, and eventually he did. And we had a very long, very slow, very old-fashioned, very romantic courtship. And I knew that Dougie would be the man I waited my whole life for when he said, "Can I come down and go to church with you on Sundays? Because I like what you have to say about your experience there." Now, Doug lived in Half Moon Bay, so every visit, every date, every opportunity we got together, it was a 4-hour round trip journey for him. So I knew he was intentional, that he really wanted to see me. And eventually we got married. We got married here on November 10th, 2007, right there. And immediately he got involved in church. He sat on the board, and he loved to usher and greet the ladies in and welcome them into a seat here. He was everything I ever wanted in a guy, and I saved the best for last. And he passed away on April 26th of 2016, and I miss him every day. I love you, Dougie.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I gave people the opportunity that if they didn't want to share personally, they could give me something to read. And so Jim Fletcher gave me this to read about his wife. So he says, "Marie, my wife of 26 years, died in 2014 after 5 years of cancer and chemo, slowly taking bits and pieces of her. She died peacefully in my arms. Her last shuddering breath still caresses my face long after it serves any purpose. She is gone. Her moment passed in a blink of God's eye. She had her time, her full measure of experience. Her life is a swirling mix of joy, hope, perseverance, at the end only wanting peace and another breath, until peace won the day. She fades now. Conflict seems softer and more remote, pleasures remembered but muted, slowly turning autumn colors, springtime's vibrance now translucent and ethereal. This is as it should be. She left me changed, formed by her hand, nurtured in a way only a woman's love can. I lacked the character to become who I am now without her. She prepared me for this next breath, my next tear. I am awake at last. I have no time to waste, this next moment as urgent as any that comes before. and independent of any that comes after. Now is my time to be happy. Now is my time to love. So thank you, Huckleberry, as we call him. Thank you for sharing those beautiful thoughts with us. You know, and I was thinking about some of the folks that this community has lost. Of course, Rory Elder, who was Vicky's husband of, I don't know, some 20-some years. We all, well, I don't know about all, most of us knew him. We miss him terribly, so we feel him here with us sometimes. I know I have felt him guiding me on my path to ministry, so we love you, Rory, and we miss you. And Dan Schaefer, who is also our spiritual teacher here, we love and miss him very much also. I'm thinking right now of the Waldens, Patty and Ted, who both died in the last couple of years. I know this past year, John Palmer in our community died. Am I forgetting anyone they all count, but I'm just thinking recently. So if we've forgotten you, we do still honor you. So you got these little slips of paper. You are welcome to fill them out with the names of your loved ones. It's not necessary, but it's just an extra step to sort of give it that physical piece of writing their names down. The ones that we receive here, we will send on to Silent Unity for prayer. They'll be held in prayer for 30 days. So let's prepare now for our ceremony. Make sure you've got a candle at home ready to light. I'm going to step down there, and I'm hoping that my mic is going to continue functioning properly. So I invite you now to just relax and get comfortable as we open our hearts to remember our loved ones. And know that if sadness comes up during this time or tears, that's okay. It's a healthy part of the process. We are here to create a loving and healthy and safe space for one another to process some of those feelings. Okay. So we begin by lighting the candle of the past. No, I'm going to start over here. So in honoring the past, we call forth the powers of strength, wisdom, and love. We remember those we have loved and those we have lost. The loss of these loved ones may be fresh, or it may have been some time since they passed. But either way, we know that their absence is something we will always carry with us. We may be experiencing intense grief, or our sadness may have mellowed to a dull ache. Whatever we are feeling, we hold our own and one another's tender hearts lovingly, and we gently make room for all of it. We take time to remember these dear ones. We honor them and the lives they lived upon this earth, recalling their special contributions and feeling grateful for all that they gave to us and how they blessed our lives. We hold our memories of them dear, and we remember them often. And in the words of Unity's poet laureate, James Dillett Freeman, he wrote this about his deceased wife. If I had never loved you, if I had never lain heart hearing heart beside you, I would not have this pain. I would not have this sorrow. I would not have this pain, but if I had not loved you, I would have lived in vain. So now we light the candle that represents the present. And in honoring the present, we call forth the powers of understanding, will, and order. Though our dear ones have moved on to the next adventure, we must learn how to live in the present without them. We walk that delicate balance between remembering them and letting them go. We allow ourselves all the time we need to find our way through our grief. As time goes by, we continue to think of our dear ones. We light a candle, maybe we set a place for them at the table, we tell stories, we take time to look at old photographs. We keep their memory alive and learn to live the new shape that our lives have taken. We learn to live ever more present in this now moment as we begin to accept life on life's terms and we lean into the mystery. We find that freedom and we begin to feel joy bubbling up in our lives once again. This poem comes from Native American tradition. I give you this, one thought to keep. I am with you still. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the sweet uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not think of me as gone. I am with you still in each new dawn. And now we light the third and final candle to honor the future. And in honoring the future, we call forth imagination, faith, and zeal. We allow that hope to spring forth again and again, guiding our way forward. We trust in the universe's perfect plan for our lives. We hold fast to the truth that love never dies, it merely changes shape. We allow Spirit to guide us, and the love we feel for our dear ones keeps us ever moving forward. We let go of worry and concern and trust in what will be. And in the words of our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, words that he wrote at, I believe, 96 years of age, we fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by us. And finally, in the words of Sri Chinmoy, death is not the end. Death can never be the end. Death is the road. Life is the traveler. The soul is the guide. And so now I invite you, if you have written the name of a loved one or loved ones, hold them in your heart and let's say this, the affirmation that's written on it together. I honor, remember, and bless my dear loved ones. And so now we're going to do what we do here, and at home you can be having your own time, but I'm going to invite folks to come up and place the blessing slip in the basket and then take a candle to light and place in the bowl to honor your loved one. And you can go ahead and light your own candles at home. So yeah, go ahead. So I invite you now to just take a few more moments in that memory of your loved ones. And when you are ready at home, you can blow out your candle and take that memory deep within you where you can keep it and cherish it always. So as we bring this ceremony to a close, we take a moment to just feel gratitude for the wisdom in these ancient rituals, gratitude for the Mexican perspective on death that can help us to broaden our own understanding, and for this spiritual community which comes together to provide a safe and loving and supportive space in which to grieve together. And we mostly give thanks for this time spent in sacred communion with our loved ones and with one another. So we say, thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
And so it is.
So it is.
Amen.
Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, treasure, and talent in order to sustain the spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation, in abundance and joyous generosity. We transform all appearance of fear or lack into a faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. And with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, and that we have enough, and that there always is enough to both have and to share. And again, we are grateful to all of you for your online giving through our website at unityofmontereybay.org and through your mailed-in offerings, including those who have set up automatic giving with your banking institutions. We are truly blessed. And now, from this place of faith and gratitude, I invite you to join me in mindful intention and joining in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God.
The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time. Any fool can do it. There ain't nothing to it. Nobody knows how we got to the top of the hill. But since we're on our way down, we might as well enjoy the ride. The secret of love is in opening up your heart. It's okay to feel afraid, but don't let that stand in your way. 'Cause everyone knows that love is the only road. And since we're only here for a while, we might as well show some style. Give us a smile, isn't it a lovely ride? Sliding down, gliding down, try not to try too hard, it's a lovely ride. The thing about time is that time isn't really real. Just your point of view. How does it feel for you? Einstein said he could never understand it all. Planets spinning through space, the smile upon your face. give us a smile. Isn't it a lovely ride? A sliding down, gliding down. Try not to try too hard. It's just a lovely ride. Isn't it a lovely ride? See me sliding down, gliding down. Try not to try too hard. It's just a lovely ride. The secret of life is enjoying the passage of time.
Thank you, John, and thank you, James Taylor.
All right.
Wasn't that one of Rory's favorite songs?
Yes, he
yes.
sang it once,
So we're
too.
honoring Rory. Oh, that's one of the ones he sang?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, that was also for you, Rory. And so this morning we also want to thank Carrie Landry and Carla Bonoff for allowing us to use their music, and always our awesome music team and members of the community that step up to sing and do these awesome things like John did. Another time for John. Yay! That was awesome. So as we prepare to bring the service to a close this morning, we just want you to know we are so grateful you have joined us here this morning, and we hope we've made you feel at home in our Unity of Monterey Bay community. And we want you to know that wherever you are on your spiritual path, you are welcome here. Our unityofmontereybay.org website has a prayer request link. We are receiving those prayers, and our prayer chaplains are praying weekly over Zoom. And the prayers also go on to Silent Unity. You can also contact Silent Unity through phone, email, Alexa, their app, lots of ways to connect yourself with prayer. So make sure you stay prayed up during this time. We will be having our virtual coffee hour after the service beginning, well, it's going to begin a little bit late, let's say probably 11:30-ish, but I will be there. And so now before we form our closing circle, let's just take one more moment to express and feel our gratitude for this sacred time together, for these teachings which guide us in our lives, and for that one power and one presence, God the good, which never fails us, and for this sacred community of folks that calls us back again and again to the truth of who we are. We are grateful. So now let's make our circle for our prayer for protection and our peace song. This morning, particularly holding our nation in our hearts as we say this prayer, and holding the electoral process, and everyone, I don't want to say risking their lives, but taking that risk to go out and vote. People that are standing in lines, I've seen it on TV, people standing in lines to exercise their right to vote. We just bless them. We bless and hold all of the candidates and affirm for them divine order and divine guidance. The power, presence, I forgot how it starts.
The light.
The light of God. Yeah, it's only been 25 years or something. That's why I got my notes. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. And the presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. Once again, thanks for joining us today and have a wonderful week.